My name's Edward Owen. I farm in Lanspride at Trowell and Gannel, that's the name of our farm. We run about just under 270 acres and rent about 30 acres. We're predominantly a dairy-based farm. We milk about 115 cows, and there's about 180 followers here as well. Today we got an open day regarding two trials that we've been had on. One regarding the young calves, on how we rear young calves from day one. It's been quite a big issue, we've had trouble with it, and we've got somebody on board to look at trialling and doing various different ideas to improve it, hopefully.
Hi, I'm Chris Deller, independent grasser specialist. Today I'm going to talk to a group about managing heifers at grass. We spend a lot of attention and focus on the milking herd, and so often heifers are just left to fend for themselves. We're on a farm where he's actually not calving his heifers down until 31, 32 months. And research has proven that all those older heifers are costing 500-600 quid extra in terms of keeping the animals to that age. We're losing out on milk yield. My target for this farm is to try and drop his calving age by at least 3, maybe 4 months, and ideally over the long term closer to 24 months. There's lots of aspects where things could be going wrong on this farm. We've got issues in the calving shed with young calves. We've got issues with younger calves going out at grass. We've then got winter housing, and one of the areas I want to look at was the performance of yearling heifers at grass prior to going to the bull. So for the last 4 or 5 months we've been looking at grass quality and regularly weighing the heifers to make sure they're hitting live weight gains. The target for my heifers here would be somewhere around about 0.7 kilos a day live weight gain, and in order to achieve that they've got to have fairly decent grass and a good level of intake. So just been monitoring to make sure that they are hitting those targets. Having moaned and groaned to the farmer that he wasn't doing everything right and I could do it better, I found out actually that what's going on here is actually not far up spot on. They are doing their 0.7 a day. Grass quality I've been measuring is somewhere around 10.5 megajoules of energy a kilo of dry matter, which is within spec. It's grass and management. The intakes aren't bad. We could do with some improvement in terms of at the minute everything's block grazed. Maybe some rotational grazing might improve intakes and might push that on a bit. One of the biggest issues we've got, having said that the averages are fine, is there's such a big spread. So I've got a large range of ages of animal and a large range of performance. So the next stage is then going on to look at whether we can improve the actual bulling process that goes on. At the minute the bulls tend is going into a bit late, driven by the fact I've got a big group. So I'm encouraging the farmer here to split his heifers into several groups so we can get tighter control of when the bull goes in, rather than letting some of those get too strong. So it's work in progress. The next step is also then to go back and look at what the younger animals are doing. So I'm happy that the yearling heifers are okay, but I still think they're probably 50, 60, 70 kilos short when they get turned out here in the spring. So somewhere in that first 12, 14 months of life, we've lost a bit of live weight gain. So we think some's in the calving shed, but next year it'll be more of a focus on the younger heifers and how they're doing at grass.
Hello, my name's Sam Evans. I work with Kite Consulting, and today we're at Trowell and Gannel, just outside Lanspride in Paris, looking at colostrum quality and calf rearing from date of birth up to the first part of weaning. Initially we started off with Ed here on a little calf trial, looking at colostrum quality, how we can improve or reduce mortality rates and increase the sort of early start of the life cycle of the calf to try and get a better growing calf from weaning onwards to carry on the next step of the enterprises. So start to life, the first port of call is actually cleanliness for that calf. The calf, as I said earlier, has got no immunity whatsoever itself, therefore we've got to give it a helping hand. So cleanliness becomes paramount in terms of us as humans looking after that calf, and also the environment it's born into in terms of cleanliness of the cow, cleanliness of the pen. So the first job is dipping the calf's navel, iodine solution to help that navel dry out and close up. Typically you'd start off straight away at birth, a couple of hours later, and ideally when you move it from the calving pen actually into the individual pen or your next stage of rearing system. Typically what you can find is calves that don't have their navels dipped and do become diseased later on in life typically have a 13% more likely chance of getting pneumonia. So if we look at colostrum, then the first thing is basically the 4 Qs. We want quality, we want quantity, we want quickly, and we want it quietly. Obviously there's a number of factors that affect colostrum quality, and those can be breed of animal, stage of lactation in terms of number of lactation. Typically heifers and second calves would be lower. Third calves generally have the best colostrum quality, and it tails off in later life as well. And also in terms of how the cow has been vaccinated in terms of in the dry period. Some cows are now vaccinated, which helps E. coli, rotavirus, diseases like that for the early calf. And that's a big positive step for a lot of farms. How do you measure quality? There's a number of ways. You can use a tool called a refractometer, which measures colostrum quality, or you can use what they call a colostrum meter. This is very similar like an anti-freeze tester, where you dip it in the colostrum and the specific weight rises or lowers depending on how good the colostrum is. Typically you're looking for a value of above 50. The thing then you can do if you are testing colostrum is then store it for your next set of calves coming through, so you have got good colostrum, you know what colostrum you've got and what colostrum you should be targeting, or you can target where that colostrum goes. For example, your preference would be to your herd replacements. Obviously defrosting it, you have to be careful that you heat it up gradually rather than instantly, so you don't kill off the antibodies. The next thing is obviously quantity. We said we want 2.5 to 3 litres of colostrum straight away if we can, and then obviously quietly. The biggest challenge though is actually giving calves enough milk. Historically, the industry would typical advice would be 2 litres twice a day. Now, in reality, for today's calf, that isn't physically enough milk, and actually it typically should be short of actual energy, and therefore in the first week to 14 days would actually lose weight, and that's something we want to try and avoid. That calf's early start of life is actually the time she's the most efficient converter of feed into meat, muscle growth, whatever you want to determine it as. So therefore, the more we can get into that calf in terms of early growth and capitalise on that growth rate, the long-term effects are very positive for the herd. And typically, if we get that growth rate, that coming up to another 1,000 litres per cow once she does come into the calving herd and calve down. The other thing to remember is obviously we've got the 50 kilogram calf. Typically, in reality, for most milk replacers, most whole milk, really to meet her energy requirements, we need 3 litres twice a day. That's what we need to be working at, as well as availability of water, clean water every day, and also the starter pellets to start that off so she can start taking on hard feed as well. The other thing to remember is if we throw in some cold weather, we've got what we call the calf's temperature critical zone. 0 to 3 weeks, that would be 20 degrees C, so actually a lot higher than you think. 3 weeks onwards, we're around about 10 degrees centigrade. Typically, if you look at a calf at freezing point, so the 0 temperature, a 3-week-old calf would need an extra 4 megajoules of energy. So typically that could be another 200 grams of calf powder, for example, depending on what type of calf powder you're feeding, if you are using calf powders. But what it means is generally they need to be fed more than what you've always been told and what you typically think is enough. Typically then we're weaning at sort of 56 to 63 days. We want that calf to be eating 1.5 kilos to 1.8 kilos of dry feed. Typically a starter pellet. Starter pellets generally work better than coarse mix in terms of the growth for that animal. So that's one thing to bear in mind. Ideally then also they'll be drinking up to 4 to 5 litres of water as well. That's why the water element is critical. But also then when we come up to weaning, generally it's determined by feed. We want that to be weaned by 8 weeks, and then weaning into groups. If we can wean them into groups, generally calves will carry on growing better and not have as much of a growth check.